Hello and welcome to the big picture. After having taken a rigid stance in the parliament by refusing to allow a resolution to be passed in the Rajya Sabha over Israel's offensive on Gaza, the Indian government has gone ahead and voted in favor of a UN Human Rights Council resolution, heavily criticizing Israel and appointing an international commission of inquiry. The resolution, which was moved by Pakistan, was passed last night in Geneva with 29 votes in favor and only one country, United States, voting against it, while 17 nations abstained. India voted with Pakistan, China, Russia, Brazil and South Africa, among other countries. The Indian vote has come in for criticism from certain quarters in India, which had supported the NDA government's stand of equidistance from both Israel and Palestine on this issue, which was enunciated by Foreign Minister Sushma Swaraj in Parliament early this week. Critics see it as NDA government succumbing to pressure to toe the old pro-Palestine line, while those who have been demanding a resolution against Israel have welcomed it. What does this vote mean for India and especially the NDA government, which had taken what some saw as a pro-Israel stand, or as the government insisted, was that of equidistance? Will India maintain this stand in future also? We will discuss all this today with an eminent panel of guests. I have with me Shashi Tharoor, former Union Minister and Congress MP, Saugata, former Union Minister and Trinamool Congress MP, Vivek, Katju, former Ambassador and Foreign Affairs Analyst, Hardeep, Puri, BJP member and former Ambassador, and Cherian, Associate Editor of Frontline magazine. Welcome to all of you. Shashi Tharoor, I would like to come to you first. Do you think India did the right thing by voting in favor of the resolution in Geneva?
Absolutely the right thing, because it's consistent with our policy. But what I'm curious about is the incoherence of the BJP approach, having refused to discuss this matter in Parliament initially, having said that any discussion, any resolution would be counterproductive, having stressed that they wish to be even-handed and so on. They have actually voted for a resolution that condemns the failure of Israel to end its occupation and condemns in the strongest terms, I'm quoting the resolution, the widespread, systematic and gross violations of international human rights and fundamental freedoms that may amount to international crime. So this is extremely strong language. Now, if you ask them how can they square this with their position, they say, well, it was fairly even-handed because we didn't co-sponsor, we only voted for it. There is language in the resolution that condemns violence against all civilians, including Israeli civilians. And I think that's certainly fair, because no one is in favor of violence against Israeli civilians either. But the resolution specifically calls for Israel to end its closure of the Gaza Strip.
And also an inquiry commission.
I beg your pardon? And
also an
inquiry commission. Well, the inquiry commission, frankly, may not be allowed to function in practice because they are unlikely to be given access to the territory by Israel. But that's another matter. The commission is not so much it. The issue is language, because what the foreign minister had repeatedly said was that language could be inflammatory and could needlessly spoil our relations with Israel. So I think that the BJP has to really get its head straight on what its policy is. This has been consistently India's policy, and I see no inconsistency in the approach of this government from its predecessors for many years on these fundamental issues. But I do see an inconsistency between the BJP's stated wishes in Parliament and their vote on this.
Okay, let me get Hardeep Puri in those. Hardeep Puri, why this inconsistency? Or do you think there is any inconsistency at all?
There is no inconsistency. The Fortaleza declaration of the BRICS, the position taken in Parliament, and most recently the vote yesterday in the Human Rights Commission are entirely consistent. My friend Shashi should know that countries take positions on UN resolutions based on their content. This resolution, which was voted in Geneva, is exactly the same resolution with minor differences of nuance with what India has been supporting all along. Now let me come straight to the substance.
Right.
The issue when you look at Gaza is that A, there is illegal occupation, number one. Number two, there is a settlement policy which is illegal in international law. When the issue came before the Security Council, and we were a member, of the 15 members of the Security Council, 14 termed the settlement policy illegal, and the 15th, United States, found it difficult to disagree, but because of domestic compulsions, they chose to call it illegitimate. And number three, whilst Hamas has to be criticized and their action, which is amounts to actions of terror, they will argue that this is because they are in fighting occupation. Israel has a right to defend itself, but the use of force was entirely disproportionate. 650 civilians died as a result of the military action which started on 13th June, whereas 2 civilians died. So all right, you have to be even-handed, but this resolution condemns exactly the same things which we have been condemning for 30 years. So why is Mr. Tharoor choosing to be selective in his interpretation and saying that this is what we voted because the UPA government voted that way? We voted exactly the same way when we had an NDA government under Mr. Vajpayee. Now let me come to the fourth.
Yeah. Mr. Puri, Hardeep, to make your point.
Mr. Puri, the question is, you don't see any inconsistency in the approach in what the foreign minister said on the floor of the parliament?
None whatsoever.
I'll come to you, Mr.
Not at all. Not at all. No.
Not at all. Okay.
No, you know, it's like this. First you spread a canard. No, first of all, let me complete this. Just give me just half a minute.
Yes.
First you spread a canard and then you try and counter it. They have been saying all along. What did Sushma Swaraj say on the floor of parliament? Listen, our position has not changed an iota. It's exactly the same as para 38 of Fortaleza. Why did we not want a discussion initially? Because the Prime Minister had already signed on to the Fortaleza declaration, and on the 15th when the demand was made, that's the position she took. Then we had a short notice, short duration discussion, and the government's and the minister's reply was absolutely consistent.
Okay.
So to read meaning, to find inconsistency is something which is Shashi's prerogative, and I respect him for making a good effort at this.
Okay. I mean, the question was the tone and tenor of discussion and the tone and tenor of what was said there on the floor of the House. Anyway, let me get Mr. Saugata Roy on this. I'll come to you, Mr. Katju, after that. Mr. Saugata Roy, would you agree with what Hardeep Puri says, that, you know, there is all the three, whether it is Fortaleza, Parliament and now the Geneva resolution, all are very consistent?
I wouldn't say so. Well, the resolution passed in the United Nations Human Rights Council is consistent with the views we have held all along on the Palestinian question.
Right.
Ever since the time of Gandhiji, and then followed by Jawaharlal and all the other governments. This new NDA government, because of his inexperience in foreign affairs, originally deterred in outright condemning the Israel aggression. In fact, you may remember that Rajya Sabha session had to be adjourned for 5 days at a stretch.
Right.
Because the government was not ready to allow a discussion in Rajya Sabha for fear that some comment made there would vitiate Indo-Israeli relations. While it is nobody's case that Israel should cease to exist, it is everybody's case that Israel, in retaliation for maybe 3 people who were abducted, cannot go on a genocide, killing hundreds of innocent men, women and children. As you earlier mentioned, that 600 people have already been killed. So the government's inexperience came up in its initial reactions. But now it seems that the government has corrected itself, and in voting for the United Nations Human Rights Council recommendation, it has become consistent. It may be mentioned that at the BRICS summit,
right,
where Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa were there, a similar resolution,
right,
condemning the aggression, asking Israel to do ceasefire, was adopted. But during Modi's absence from India, the ministers were not ready to commit themselves. Things have improved after Mr. Modi has come back, and the BRICS resolution on this matter has come to the minister's hand. And so now India is back to normal with its consistent position.
Mr. Katju?
Look, I won't enter...
India has come back to...
No, I won't enter into the politics of this. But as a former diplomat, what do I see? I see first of all that there are differences in national positions and differences that sometimes you adopt in an international setting when there is, especially in the UN, and I'm sure Shashi will agree with me, that if there is a group of people, you can take a slightly variant approach without giving up the essence of your national position. The national positions that we have taken are reflected in two recent statements. One on the 22nd at the debate in the UN Security Council, and the other yesterday at Geneva. The only difference I find between the earlier statements and the present statement is a stronger reference to Israel in the context of a disproportionate use of force. That is the only difference. To that, I think there has been an evolution. The position on the 10th, when the first statement had issued, and the position as it has evolved, has naturally changed. And therefore, I think the use of this term is appropriate. And on your program, I had said earlier that there can be a use of a stronger formulation.
But you were not very...
You
didn't think that the Indian government at that point of time was,
no, I thought
was wrong. And
no, I still...
And you didn't...
I still maintain that the position that the Indian government has taken, and Shashi will pardon me, has been consistent. They took a position, one, that there has been no change in policy on Palestine. That is reflected in both these national statements. Two, that we will look after our interests and adopt an approach which is consistent with our interest in the sense that we will look at violence comprehensively.
Mr. Katju.
Second, third point, and that in this case, when you go into a multilateral setting, as you went to BRICS in Fortaleza, there you took a position which was a consensus position. Now here too, what have you done? The last 5 times there was such a resolution on there's a 6th special session, you voted for the resolutions, right? There was no basic change in our positions in the earlier, as far as an even approach is concerned in between Palestine and Israel. In that context, consistent with our support for the creation of the state of Palestine. Now, I don't see a big hullabaloo here.
Mr. Katju, 1 second.
Please.
Last week we had a discussion here. You were not too happy with the way certain people in the panel argued about passing a resolution in the parliament. You made a point that
I will tell you.
You made a point
I will
that
again say
these nations have never helped India.
Listen,
or,
I will maintain
Palestine, on Kashmir and things like that.
That is why.
Why should we take that? That was the stand.
No, I am still taking that stand. In our national position, I will still take that stand. But when you go into a multilateral, when you go into a multilateral setting, you don't want to stand alone. The only one standing alone.
Okay, you're not.
Look, flexibility is the essence of diplomacy.
That you have always been saying. I understand that, but the thing is this: you're not comfortable with the fact that you're comfortable. You are comfortable with the fact that India has voted on a resolution moved by Pakistan on these issues.
Perfectly comfortable, because as we have voted in the past, there has been no departure.
There has been no departure.
There has been no departure. There was a creation.
I'll come back.
There was a departure.
Okay. John, you think that there is consistency in the Indian stand?
I think there is consistency, because basically there is no difference between...
no, I'm talking of the Indian stand domestically and Indian stand outside on these issues.
I think...
Indian government stand, not Indian stand.
I think the government is speaking with, if I can use the term, folk tongue on this issue. And as you know, the NDA government has always been very close to Tel Aviv. Remember the famous statement by Brajesh Mishra when he called for an axis, Washington, Tel Aviv, Delhi axis. So I think, and when Mr. Modi was elected, the happiest people were in Tel Aviv, because Modi has made many trips as Chief Minister of Gujarat to Tel Aviv. And I think India had no other option but to vote with the resolution, because out of the 650 Palestinians killed, more than 125 are
it's
children.
More than 700.
125 are children.
170 children.
Oh, now, yes, now it has gone up. The figures are going up. I mean, we would have been the laughing stock, not only in the Arab world, but all over internationally, if we would have abstained.
But how do you explain the certain European countries, Shashi Tharoor, like Germany, France, and all these countries? Because from what we read from reports coming from Tel Aviv, and they are very upset with the way the Europeans have abstained.
Well, 17 countries abstained, but in
and
fact,
there is also a suggestion that India could also have abstained.
Well, frankly, after having heard the foreign minister in Parliament and had reports of what she said in the Rajya Sabha, I thought we would abstain. What's interesting is that, as I said, the incoherence is not in terms of inconsistency with India's traditional positions at the United Nations and on this issue. The inconsistency is with their domestic posturing on this matter. And what is striking is that if you look at the European speeches yesterday, they used language very comparable to the Indian position. That is, that they criticized Israel in equally severe terms for what they're doing, but they ended up abstaining precisely to send a political signal to Israel. And if you look at those who abstain, the European countries, there's the Republic of Korea, yes. There are a couple of African countries. Right. So it's countries which have prized, if you like, their relationship with Israel above their desire to take a moral position on all of this. Now, India in the past, of course, has been uncompromising on the matter, but this government has spoken a very different language in Parliament than it has gone along with in Geneva. And, the fact is that consistency with existing Indian policy is great, and the rest of us will not dissent at all from this. But it asks a real question: where is the coherence within the government? And I'm sure people in Israel, for example, are wondering. When you see the kind of language in the resolution, it's much, much stronger than the BJP would normally have associated.
It's an extremely strong statement. Mr. Hardeep Puri, this, what you're talking about, that there has been consistency, absolute consistency in the stand which India has taken so far, and now the stand which has been taken in Geneva, you think this stand will be consistent and will be able to maintain this stand in future also on this issue?
Mr. Moderator,
my name is Girish, Nikam, sir.
And I may submit to you and to my... yes, sir. Let me submit to you that even when I was permanent representative in Geneva from 2002 to 2006, we voted exactly on similar language in a similar manner. That's been going on for 30 years. Now, Mr. Tharoor's submission that the discussion in Parliament, if he carefully reads Sushma Swaraj's speech when she wound up the short duration discussion, he will come to the conclusion that there is no inconsistency. What he is referring to is the government's initial reluctance, or so it seemed, to have a discussion on the floor of the Rajya Sabha. Now that I admit, but the explanation of the government has to be accepted, that the Prime Minister, having committed himself to para 38 of the Fortaleza Declaration, the short notice discussion to then short duration discussion at some stage did not appear to be necessary for whatever reason.
Mr.
But
Puri,
when the discussion took place,
no,
the
Mr. Puri, you have mentioned this earlier also. Mr. Puri, my question is this. There are a lot of in the last 12 hours that this has happened, there has been a lot of critics, especially critics who were very supportive of the government stand earlier, or when it was refusing to have a discussion in the Parliament. Now they seem to be very disappointed with the stand being taken in Geneva by the Indian government. How would you react to that?
I would react to it by submitting to you, just imagine the kind of company we would have been if we had abstained. Only one country voted against it, which was the United States.
Right.
But if you look at the 17 countries which abstained, would you have liked to be in the company of Burkina Faso and Benin amongst the Africans? Or would you have liked to be in the company of Britain and France, which have an entirely different situation? So my position, and I'm speaking in my personal capacity as a Foreign Service officer for 40 years, is that I do not think we had any choice, point one. Point two, if there were unrealistic expectations that we would change our position, and I've seen some tweets, etc., I think these are from well-meaning friends from people who would like to see a change in the government policy, but the government of the day has to take a realistic position based on India's national interest.
Okay.
And I think India's national interest is very well served by para 38 of Fortaleza, Sushma Swaraj's statement and the vote in the UNHRC.
You raised an important, Mr. Katju. Is India's national interest served by the in the long term also by taking the stand which we have taken?
I think we have taken a perfectly consistent stand on this.
So in terms of long-term national interest, there is no problem.
I don't see any problem. And you mentioned the critics who are disappointed. Perhaps they are not fully aware of the complexities and the nuancing of international diplomacy. And as a former foreign service officer, I entirely see consistency. And it was good that there was no resolution of parliament. Once you have a resolution of parliament, you lock in your negotiators and diplomats.
You don't get locked in when you vote in favor of a resolution like the one.
No, of course not, because your national position reflects your actual policy. And there are numerous considerations when you go and vote or decide to abstain.
So so what you're trying to say is that there is still leeway for the government to have, some changes in its policy as far as at the national level on this issue.
On this, the government has already said that they will adhere to the policy which has been traditional with respect to Palestine.
Okay.
That is the first point. As far as nuancing is concerned, that changes.
Okay. So, and you agree with Mr. Puri that India had no choice but to vote the way it voted?
If you see the kind of if you see the pattern of voting, you see that in Fortaleza you had the BRICS, your BRICS. They too have national positions. They voted for this.
All the BRICS countries have voted
for this.
Right.
So you've gone along with the Fortaleza consensus. What is so strange about
Fortaleza, Mr. Saugata Roy, this is just a taking forward the Fortaleza consensus, and there is no inconsistency.
Yes.
You agree with that? And you think that's the right thing to have been done, and that the government had no choice?
The resolution where it's absolutely right that the government had no choice. They could not deviate from our long-standing position. The BRICS resolution at Fortaleza only confirmed the position. Only thing that marred the whole impact was the hesitancy in the government to have a resolution. I do not believe in these diplomatic niceties that once you have a resolution in parliament, you don't have any flexibility. On basic human questions, on issues on which we had a stand for a long time consistently, we should not hesitate to have a resolution when men, women and children are being killed, mostly innocent non-combatants are being killed. Then we had no choice. The initial hesitancy of the government did spoil things. After all, we, along with the Arab nations, have supported the Palestinian cause all the time. We have had established diplomatic relations with Israel. We wish well of them, but when they attack, people attack innocent civilians on the excuse that 3 of their people were abducted. India can't just afford to sit quiet.
Absolutely.
Not internally, not externally, not nationally, not internationally.
Okay, sir.
I agree with Saugata Roy, Girish, but I just want to say that certainly the government, in signing on to this resolution and voting for it, has gone well beyond anything Sushma Swaraj said in Parliament.
Absolutely.
It has explicitly used the word condemn twice, which he did not.
Right.
It has specifically condemned the prolonged occupation which the Israelis have conducted, which he did not address. It not only addresses the humanitarian tragedy, which Sushma did as well, the number of civilians killed, but it specifically calls to an end of the blockade of Gaza, the so-called illegal closure of the occupied Gaza Strip, which is actually the sole demand of Hamas. When the Egyptians came up with a peace truce offer that the Israelis accepted, Hamas's only condition was, yes, if you end the blockade. And Israel could not accept that.
One thing which I noticed is that in this resolution, there is no mention of Hamas.
We have also condemned Hamas. The issue is on the blockade.
There is no mention
ending
of
the
Hamas
blockade
in the
is something on which we have taken position for the
There
last
is
many years.
no reference to the word terrorism, which the Israelis would have wanted. And there is no reference to Hamas. So there is definitely a gap between what the BJP has been saying.
Non-state actors. There is a reference to non-state actors. There is a reference to non-state actors. Non-state actors are not agents of the state. They are terrorists.
Okay, Mr. Puri, Mr. Katju, my question is this.
I didn't see any.
Should we approach this issue, yes, maybe in future also, because this is something which doesn't look like ending very soon.
Yes.
As a moral issue or as a political issue, how do you expect, as a diplomat, how would you approach the issue?
For me, India's national interest comes first. In my calculus, it's first of all India's strategic interests. They are absolutely supreme.
The moral dimension of the issue is secondary.
The moral dimension, unfortunately in the real world of diplomacy, moral dimensions, when they help your strategic interests, fine. But we are not in the charity business.
We are not in the charity. Mr. Hardeep Puri, would you agree to what Mr. Katju says?
I always suspected that my very good friend Vivek had a little less of the moral streak than I thought. Look, you cannot divorce morality from politics. I mean, you cannot have politics without morality. That would be totally immoral. What we have here is a position in law. Is occupation legal? Are illegal settlements legal in law? And here you have killed 650 civilians.
Absolutely.
That is totally immoral. For every two... Yeah, so I'm afraid the two things... They go together. They go together.
Hardeep, we live in
I'm also a hard-headed diplomat like him, but I'm just pulling his leg. I'm pulling his leg.
No, one last sentence.
I don't know one last you pulled his leg.
One last Hardeep, you know as well as I do that the world we inhabit is amoral. And that is the world we have to navigate.
Amoral.
Yes.
Amoral.
My question is, my question is, why is Israel so strategically important to India, this small, tiny little country? I mean, I think India should send a stronger signal to Israel. And, for instance, join the BDS, boycott, divestment and sanctions. Even in America, you see, in academia there, among the student community, even big business has started boycotting Israel. Now, our interest with Israel is only, I think, limited to arms and for counter-terrorism measures. I mean, there are other countries which are willing to supply the same kind of quality of arms, the same amount of arms, and other countries willing to, exchange, ideas about counter-terrorism. And what is so important about Israel in our strategic interest, in our national interest?
I don't know. Shashi Tharoor, would you like to answer the question? I'll come to you, Mr. Puri.
For the Palestinian cause,
Mr. Puri, I'll come to you.
Can coexist.
No, Mr. Puri, I'll come to you. Let me get Mr. Shashi Tharoor first. I'll come to you. Yes, very quickly, we are running out.
I know. Well, frankly, I don't fully agree with John Cherian here, because obviously we in the UPA as well had a position that relations with Israel were of great value to India, and that at the same time we didn't want it to be at the expense of our relationship with the Arab world, and indeed our consistent position on the Palestinian cause. So we are not, for example, disagreeing with Israel's right to defend itself against terror attacks, but we are challenging the proportionality of this defense. Their defense cannot negate the human rights of others.
And the morality.
These are the kinds of positions. This is the moral position we're taking.
Okay. Mr. Saugata Roy, very quickly.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mr. Saugata Roy?
Yes.
Very quickly. John Cherian.
No, I do think that India's foreign policy had always a moral content to it as well as a political content to it. It said that foreign policy is enlightened self-interest, but India's foreign policy has never been after self-interest. While we have bought military hardware from Israelis, and we may continue to do so, but we cannot pardon. We cannot
Okay.
condone.
Mr.
what
Puri, very
Israel
quickly.
is doing
Mr.
in
Puri, very
Palestine.
quickly, last word.
It is totally condemnable.
Okay.
And we must condemn the aggression.
Our commitment to the Palestinian cause can coexist with friendship with Israel.
Okay.
Where Israel commits excesses, we have to be party to that. Where the Hamas commits excesses on behalf of Palestinian, we have to point it out.
Okay,
but we cannot be made to choose between one and the other.
But
we will
this is-
continue to pursue our national interest.
But the resolution which has been voted for, it seems that we are pursuing one at least been very critical of Israel's role.
It's exactly the same resolution
सब
we've
रामायण हो गई अब फिर
Oh, yes,
तुम जो है
it is,
सीता
because
कौन
they feel
Sita,
650
okay,
people.
on that,
There are 650
okay, sir, we
people.
completely run out of time. Sorry, we completely run out of time. The resolution, it is at least unanimously, all the panelists agree that India did the right thing by voting in favor of the resolution in Geneva against Israel. We will wait and watch how the government will continue to pursue its policies in the coming months and years. Thanks to all my guests, Mr. Shashi Tharoor, Vivek, Katju, John Cherian, Hardeep, Puri and Saugata. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue in the big picture, same time tomorrow.